See, we've got plenty. This evening, Books and Books is very happy to welcome Mr. Frans Boetes and his new book, Forever in the Serengeti. And here to introduce Mr. Boetes, we have a great friend of Books and Books. He is the chairman of the Prologue Society. Please welcome to the podium, Mr. Bud Clark.
Thank you. He just said a few minutes ago that Books and Books has events like this many nights, but there's never been an event quite like this. You're going to get a real treat tonight. I've been asked to introduce Frans tonight, and I need to tell you a full disclosure that he's my brother-in-law and one of my best friends, so don't expect an unbiased introduction. You should know that he's here tonight with his lovely wife, Donna Reinach. Donna, wave your hand. And with his sister-in-law, my wife, Betty, and you get to wave your hand too. But it's Frans with an S, not a Z, and it's Boetes, not Boetes, so that you all get it correct. Frans is Dutch. When he was a young child in the Netherlands, American soldiers still there at the end of World War II were very kind to him and his family, and that started a love affair with America that's lasted from that time until this time, today, but especially the highlight was when Frans became an American citizen in 2008. When he was young, his parents encouraged him to travel. His father took him to Germany a whole lot and back. He traveled a whole lot in Europe in those years. When he was 15, he went with the Holland American line and saw the world, working for Holland America. Later, he went all over Egypt and Israel. And one time he took a crew of Dutch friends on a trek across Tunisia and Algeria in American World War II vintage. By this time, they were old cars, vintage convertible cars, which takes more guts than sense, I think. By 1975, Frans had settled down to business, worked for IT&T in the Netherlands. Later started a public affairs agency called Boetes Consultancy. That grew into a Europe-wide agency, lobbying firm based in Brussels. And their clients included telecom, petrochemical, agricultural industries, companies like Texaco, Mobil, Royal Dutch Shell, Hewlett-Packard, and more. Frans became a personal advisor of Nelly Kroes. Is that the right way to say that one? Kroes. Nelly Kroes. Dutch is the hardest language to speak in the world. Anyway, he eventually sold Boetes Consultancy to GCI in New York, became an executive director for Coca-Cola in the Netherlands, and later for Reliant Energy in Europe. Meanwhile, he continued to travel and to immerse himself in community service. One of his most wonderful trips was to Tanzania in 1990, and that's what we're going to hear about tonight, to visit his friend Hugo Baron van Lawick, another Dutchman who had married the famous Jane Goodall. And so he's going to tell us about the trip to see Baron van Lawick and Forever in the Serengeti. But before we put Frans on the stage, you should know that one of his most important two of his most important community service projects, or three, I guess, museum ships, one called the Mercure, which was an American MSO minesweeper that he rescued from being turned into scrap metal, and the 175-foot ship Mercure is still a museum ship in Scheveningen, near The Hague. Thanks, Peter. He was knighted by Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands in 2000 for his maritime work, maritime initiatives, including the Mercure. Frans married Betty's sister Peggy in 1997. They moved to the Netherlands for 5 years and then to Miami in 2002 before Peggy passed away in 2003. Once in the United States, Frans started working on another maritime museum, brought a World War II, a pre-World War II Coast Guard ship, the Mohawk, to Miami from Staten Island. It had fought in the Battle of the Atlantic. The city of Miami supported the project at first, but eventually turned it down, and so the Mohawk went to Key West. And then Frans also acquired a Coast Guard cutter, the Ingham, which is one of the most decorated ships in American history. It was MacArthur's flagship when he went back to the Philippines, when he returned to the Philippines, of course. And the Ingham is still in the Keys to be seen, in Key West to be seen in all its glory. And if you get down there, it's something you need to take a look at. So you can see Frans has many, many tales to tell, and we're here to hear the tale about Baron Hugo, Baron von Lawick, and about his trip to see him and Jane Goodall's son Grub, is that right? Jane Goodall's son Grub, is that right? Grub? Yeah, it wouldn't be Grub. It's Grub.
Oh, Grub. Yes.
Grub.
Sorry, I missed it.
Is it Grub or Grub? Is it Grub or Grub?
Hey, this is a live recording here. Yeah, hey, Dr. Park. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really not used to speak from paper, so you have to excuse me. But Dr. Park, as he told you, is family in a way. But I'm really honored that he did the introduction because he plays a significant role in the Prologue Society, where they really have extremely good writers. I'm just an amateur. I'm just a painter and a businessman, and I love Rust, but my wife now does not want me to work on ships anymore. Rust turned me on in the past, and that's why I had 3 Navy ships. Now I have to be working in the yard. But before I start, I like to recognize somebody else here, who is Pamela Cole, is sitting here on the front. She is the editor, and I started with her because I wrote this book in Dutch and in English out of respect for Hugo, what he did in his life. And I want to make a book for his family. I did not have the intention to make a book for all of you guys. But anyhow, I think the painting I made on the front is so exciting for some people that they don't care about the story, but they want to buy the book. But Pamela, when I started with her, I had black hair, and then she skipped a lot of text. And I sort of became gray, but she did a great job. So Pamela, thank you. Yeah. So my English is not my native language, so sometimes maybe I use the wrong word, and I have to apologize for that. Can you hear me? It's okay. Okay, I'm going to start now. I think starting is backwards. Here's Hugo. Hugo, you say in English maybe, is an amazing man, or he was an amazing man. He is a titled person, and his family had a castle, and I were friends with them for a very long time. And I just found out a couple of weeks ago that my aunt is related to his mother. Funny. But we didn't know that. I sent her the book in the Netherlands, and she sent me the whole family tree. Anyhow, he's an amazing man. He was always very shy and humble. But he is a man who chose not to live in his family castle. He lived in a tent for 30 years in the middle of the Serengeti. And you have no idea what that means. I mean, I experience that now, and when I look back, I would say I would never go there again. And I will tell you later why. It's very, very dangerous. And but he did it with all the love. He worked for National Geographic. He made movies and photos, and he became really famous. He made many, many books. He got 8 Emmy Awards. He never talked about it. And when we had him over for dinner, or he stayed in our house in The Hague, in the Netherlands, he never mentioned anything. He was just sitting there like, he looked like sort of a lion himself. He always looked around in the house and said, this is all, he looked like, I have some photos that he looked at paintings I had on the wall, and he thought, this is all nonsense, I love my tent. But there he is, and I took that photo, so except for 2 photos, all the photos I made myself, but the thing is, I had only a touristic photo camera, so the photos are not really good, not really high quality, and I never had the intention to write it. I made some notes, which I normally never do, and I found him when we were living in Sao Paulo. I had not much to do, and I thought, I'm going to write a book about him, because I took care of his 2, his brother's sons in the Netherlands for a long time, and I liked the boys, and I thought, I'm going to write them a book. And now they wrote me back and said, yeah, very nice little book, thank you. Did all that work, but anyhow. do the wrong button. Sorry. Ruth? Anyhow, I moved this forward a little so I can see it too, you know. I did this to pay respect to them, and I thought that would be a good thing. But when I was driving there, Hugo gave me a Jeep. He had always a film crew coming, and he had a base camp at, let's say, 16 tents. And he provided all these guys from the United States and England and wherever they came from in the world to give him a Jeep and a tent and hospitality, and they probably paid for that. But I thought, you know, it is very kind of him to give me a Jeep. And in the beginning, he gave me a Jeep without a radio communications because we had nothing there. There were no roads, no road signs, no cell phones, no weapons, nothing. You just drive there, and if you got stuck somewhere, well, then you can say on the radio, hey, I'm here, but they don't know where it's here. But anyhow, in the beginning, he gave me a Jeep without a radio, and that was really risky, but we didn't realize that. I was driving between hundreds and hundreds of these zebras, and after a while, you stare at the butts of these zebras, and I thought, you know, if I take the tail off, it looks like a woman. So I came back, and 2 years later, I made a painting, a zebra on high heels in the Serengeti, and I called it, it had nothing to do with Hugo actually, but I called it Close to Nature because I thought, okay, it's an animal. And then I told my friends here from my yard club about that painting, and they said, huh? How long were you in the Serengeti? So I got the message. So they thought he's really getting gaga. But I have to apologize. I'm not a strange guy. I'm just a normal man. Well, this is sort of. There's Hugo and Jane Goodall in the beginning of their life. Hugo was born in Indonesia, and you can read all about it in the book. But his mother, his family actually, his father died early. He was in the service of the Dutch Air Force, and he died. And they decided to go back to the Netherlands because, you know, after World War II, Sukarno took over in Indonesia, and most Dutch have to leave. I mean, the Dutch were there for a long time, and I think they were nice people, but some of them hated them. And everything was in Dutch. All the libraries, all the schools, everything was Dutch. But in the 50s, they said, off you go. So his mother went to the Netherlands, and Hugo went to boarding school in England. That's why he was so good in English. But he had a good relationship with somebody in the Netherlands who was making TV series on wildlife in Africa. And they needed somebody young, you know, enthusiastic, who was not afraid, sorry. And so he decided to go there. He went with the Leakey family, who had a production facility there, and they were interested in the chimpanzees, not confusing with the gorillas. I mean, most people think that Jane Goodall was part of the gorillas in the mist, but that was somebody else, and in a different country. They were always interested in chimpanzees, and they followed these families for decades while they were there to see how the father and the mother and the kids were doing, the uncles and grandparents and so. And he made a movie later in life called People of the Forest. He saw these monkeys as people. And he met Jane there, and she was really very young, and she fell in love with Hugo at a young age, and she became a baroness. Nobody knows that, but once you marry a baron, you become a baroness. If you marry a baroness, you don't become a baron. There has to be a difference. Yeah. Anyhow, yeah, sorry, Boo. Okay. I have to step away from this thing. They got a son, Grub. That is not his official name, but it was his nickname. And Grub was brought up in the wilderness for a very long time, and they realized that that was maybe really strange, but they wrote a book about it, Grub the Bush Baby, and they made a movie. And when I met Grub for the first time, He was, how old was he? 18 or something? Something like that. Full-grown man. But they had something going on which was so different than the philosophy of his parents. I mean, Hugo was there, had a love for animals his whole life. And there's Jane, who wants to preserve, wildlife in the widest thing you can imagine. She's still alive. She's 80 years and she's still working. And I think 300 days a year she travels around the world. She's United Nations representative. But there's Grub, this little young man, not interested in those things at all. And that happens a lot with kids. They do different things. And later in life, as we were there, he started to do fishing and kill fish, of course, and sell it. And that was something his mother really didn't like. I mean, I will tell you what happened to the guy, but that was later in life. Okay, this is just a map. You see everything in the book. I have a few additional things, but in the book you can see it more clearly. The Serengeti, for instance, is this part here. Here's the border with Kenya. This is where you arrive near Mount Kilimanjaro. They have an airport there. You arrive there, and then there's big volcanoes here which are almost as high as Mount Kilimanjaro. And I think Kilimanjaro is on sea level 19,000 feet from sea level. But the mountains around it are really high too, and it blocks everything. There are only a few roads. Here's one road, and there's one road that goes over the volcano to get to the park. But the park is almost a quarter of the entire country. And it's all well protected. Nobody is allowed to live there, except Hugo, funny enough, or the native Maasai people there, the tribes. And I can tell you something later what happened to us when we were part of killing a Maasai, which is a very incredible thing. And the fact that we got attacked by hyenas. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that too. Maybe I should not use the microphone. Okay. Arriving there was really exciting because we faced some serious things. First of all, you arrive out of the plane, you have to walk in the open out, and you feel this heavy air of Africa. You know, it smells different and it's wonderful. But then you walk to a little building. It's not much bigger than a shed, and that is the airport. And there is standing a man in an amazing uniform with polished shoes. And I thought the general is here to welcome us. And he said, you come out of the luggage area, and he put us in a room where only one table and one chair was without any paint on it. And I said to my friend Nish, oh, looks like they're going to interrogate us here. And he said, the papers are not okay. I said, well, we have all the papers, all the things we needed, vaccines, or you name it. And no good, no. So we didn't know what to do. And I was worried about the luggage because it was sitting there somewhere else. So finally, we got the message, it's all about money maybe at that time. I think Tanzania has moved into a much better situation, so don't be afraid if you want to go there. I don't want to speak bad about it. It's a beautiful country, but we had this little incident there, and I was afraid if I would offer money that they will arrest me, because the man looks so, he looks wealthy and healthy and important. I had a bill in my hand, and it was out of my hand before I even noticed it. But and he said, everything is fine now. But I had a lot of cigars for Hugo, because he was a big smoker, and photo rolls, films. And he said, too many cigars. And I said, how many is too many? He said, too many. And I said, well, these are for my friend Hugo van Lawick. And then he backed off. He said, okay. In the end, actually, all that smoking killed him, which was sad. He died young, actually, in a way. But here is, we went from the airport, which is sort of an exciting thing, but I'm not going to bother you. Read the book if you can. And they have street markets. They're all very simple. At that time, we only had maybe in Arusha 10,000 people living. If you look now, it's maybe 200,000 in that whole area. It's a major center, actually, for business. But Hugo said to me, you're not going to my camp immediately. It's far out. It takes you 2 days to maybe get there. I will ask somebody to pick you up. And we did, and we were looking for who is that, and it was Steffi. And Steffi was a nice girl who actually was married to somebody who was flying an airplane and taking tourists around, but her husband went down in a plane crash, and then she was left by herself with 2 kids, 2 little kids, 5 and 7 years old. And she decided to use her home as a lodge for tourists, and here is she. Steffi also became, she had to work 2 jobs, so Hugo said, you are going to be my camp manager when it's off season and you don't have tourists coming in your lodge. And she did that. So she worked on the radio in a tent all the time to get food. You know, I need a goat, I need chicken, I need fish or vegetables, and then it will come by truck days later, if you were lucky. And she decided to build her own little house in the back of this. So we arrived there after all our commotion at the airport, and we come into this lodge, and it was the previous one I show you, and it was beautiful inside. Really well done, beautiful, soft white pillows everywhere, fireplace, you could smell the wood, you know. It was very, you felt really welcomed, and they served us food, and we thought, wow, this is just the first day, man. Cannot get any better. And I said, can I walk outside? And she said, yeah, but there were no fences. Nothing is fenced in. So you have the lions and the elephants and the giraffes and everybody, buffaloes, coming just through your yard or your house, and you hope that they will not damage anything. I walked outside, and then she yelled at me, and she said, oh, you cannot go any farther. I said, there's a buffalo. And she said, the buffaloes are one of the most horrible and dangerous animals we have. And I said, why? Because it's just a cow, sort of a cow. And she said, no. She said, I was attacked with my kids at night by buffalo. She had a small Suzuki Jeep. And she said, we were lucky to escape, but they damage everything. They get wild, and then they don't know what to do anymore, and they go after you. So I backed off. I have some photos. I don't think I put it in the book. But I took some photos, and I was surprised. You realize when you come out of your own environment, this is around her house, but if you walk out of your environment, oh, how amazing is that? Yeah, no. Sorry, have to keep an eye on the time. Yeah, the thing is, we are coming from our own environment in Europe. I had a very busy life and a company and offices around different countries and my own problems, of course, and you work day and night, and my friend, she had her own company, a totally different area. And then you think, okay, we're going to have some vacation, but it takes a long time to rewind. And then when you walk there, you think, oh, just take a walk in the park or in the yard. You know, it's not like a hotel. And so we had to get used to that. I have to tell you a funny story, because my wife always says that I'm a control freak, and I don't agree with that. But we were following Steffi's Jeep, the small Suzuki Jeep, and they had a driver. They hired a driver to drive in that Land Rover. And I got worried because the guy went left to right on the road, and it was getting dark, and there were big holes in the road. I mean, big like this. And Jeep, you lose your wheel if you don't watch out, but you are going against the traffic. And some of these guys don't even have their lights on, or they don't work, or they have a flat tire and the truck got stuck in the middle of the dirt, and these were dirt roads, so were not, paved roads. So I got really it started to irritate me, and I said to the driver, I like to drive. Oh, he didn't like that at all. I said, yeah, I insist. He said, you don't know. I said, I've been in Jeeps in the Sahara and everywhere in the country, in the world. I do the Jeep. It's not a good Jeep, it's a Land Rover. I was really Jeep fan. But anyhow, we took over, but then we got an issue that there was a leak in the radiator. And he was sitting in the back, and he was sort of laughing at me like I was the cause of this, but it was not true. So he started to put chewing gum in the radiator. That didn't work, so we got some pliers and sealed it a little, and I took the top of the radiator off to have less pressure, but we had to go back to Arusha to fix the Jeep. And that's what we did there. To get from Arusha to the Serengeti, you have to go over the mountains. There is no other way to do this. And the strange thing is, you have to climb up the volcano to the far end of the, how you call it, the ridge? Yeah, I don't. And then you move farther, but you have to stay there for the night. This is really wide. I think from here to there, the crater is maybe 18 or 19 miles. But you have to go on this edge, which is really steep, and the steering wheel is on the right in this English Jeep. And I was driving it, of course. And my girlfriend always said, "Oh, you're too far on the left," and it just goes downhill, and there's nothing to protect you. So we tried to do that, and we had to buy some fuel, and diesel fuel was unusual, and we don't know what you get because they have a dirty old tank, and you have to do trading, and it takes a long time to finally get the man working and put the diesel fuel in it, whatever it is. But we didn't get stuck. But we went down this volcano the next day. But in the meantime, at night, we had to sleep there. And that was sort of a strange situation. It was a very nice lodge, but they had these small cabins. And they sent me to the wrong cabin. They said, "You have cabin number 3. And we were tired and fed up with this driver and everything, and maybe with me. And we end up in cabin 5. And I want to open the door, and there is this animal sitting in the door. I can hand it out to you, and you can look at it. If you break the glass, it will come out. Yeah, that was on the door. So I was happy that we discovered, oh, it's not this one, it's the next one. So we went in there, and I thought before I go to bed, I check everything. So I went into the room and the shower and everything, put socks in my shoes. And I'm not a sissy, I'm not really afraid, but I thought, I don't want to die here. No. Yeah, shot. Anyhow, there it is. I took a photo at home, the keys of my boat to give you, here is part of the crater. But if you go back, you see a lake on the photo, you see only this part. And you can imagine how big that crater is. In the early days, in the 50s, there were people living in the crater, farmers, and they had to leave because it all became a national park. And you find lots of lions there. Because there's a lake, so wild animals always want to drink and looking for fresh water because some of the lakes are getting salty now. And yeah, it's really scary. I mean, you walk out of the lodge and you don't know who's behind the bush, Yeah, okay. The Serengeti is actually very flat. When you come out of this volcano area, which is really high, you think you're in an airplane and descending into a huge land where the horizon is so far away that you think I'm coming out of heaven or something. But then you come into the plains, and then where Hugo made his base camp is on that ridge of that little hill. But you have to cross this lake. It's Lake Nadutu, and at that time the water was really low, but it attracts a lot of wild animals because there's not much else there to get a drink. But we had to cross this water, and that went really well because it was shallow water. And you see all these animals like cheetahs sitting there, and look what a wonderful camouflage they have. You can hardly see them. I have to tell you a little story very quick before the time is over. When I and some friends of mine bought a U.S. Navy ship a World War II ship in in New York in Staten Island was sitting in a scrapyard. We brought it to Miami and then later to Key West, and we fixed it up. And I was painting it with Home Depot navy gray paint in camouflage as it was in the 40s. There's a woman coming on the pier behind Truman Annex where we had the boat and where the new boat is sitting as well. And she said, "What is that?" I said, "That is camouflage." "Yeah, what is camouflage?" "Well," I said, "that is, you can't see it. We do that for a special reason when you're at sea." "But I still can see it," she said. And then she asked, "Is there water all around the island here?" "Yeah." This is very interesting. I don't know what sort of animals they are. It's a mixture between rhinos, donkeys, and horses. I forgot to ask Hugo what it is. Lots of birds. Everybody wants to come there and drink. But that lake is getting more salty than ever before. And one saltwater crocodile is sitting in that lake. And it ended up there with a heavy rainstorm from somewhere else. And it doesn't want to leave anymore. It's a very dangerous situation. Here we go for the first time, drive through this thing with the driver in the back. He didn't say much anymore. Yeah, we arrived finally, and you see these amazing umbrella trees. And I want to show this picture because it's very emotional for me. When we arrived, it was a very organized camp in a way. Most of the cineasts and movie makers were gone. And we had around 16 tents. I will show you in a minute how they look like. Look, military tents. But there's a tree next to Hugo's tent where he was later buried in life. Nobody is allowed to be buried in the Serengeti. You cannot do a thing there. But the Tanzania government was so grateful for what he has done for the country that they built a concrete tomb. And that create no smell or whatever because all the wildlife is just walking through there. And they buried his body. And they flew in his casket with a military plane. So I thought that was amazing. I saw it on the internet and I really got tears in my eyes, I must say. But anyhow, that was a tree where we always had talks and sit. And I thought there was a nice picture to put in the book, you know. Here he is. He looks like a lion. This is how he looked, you know, when he put on a tuxedo and came to the house in The Hague and had dinner. And he looked like, I don't belong here. But he just came back from another camp. He had another camp. And that camp he was using most of the time with only 3 tents, nothing around it. So 1 tent was for him, 1 for a cook, and 1 for an assistant or whatever. And I will tell you what happened down there. But Steffi decided to give him a haircut because he wanted to welcome us. He was really happy to see us. And he wanted to know how everything was going. And you see some of the tents behind it. That's the recreation tent where we also had dinner. So he was well shaved and he had a haircut and then he showed us around. And there was a kitchen and there was also a box with a big bucket with warm water. That was your shower, but it was outside. And very dangerous area because he had elephants in his tent and lions later who took all his linens out when he was gone. And then he started to make all these stories to us at night from, well, you know, we had a snake under your tent. And so we looked at each other like, oh, man, we don't want to have any more stories about that. But it was the case, you know. And if you had to go to the ladies' room, at night you could see all the white stones here. You know, but nobody wanted to go there because it was outside the camp. And you don't want to go and see a hyena or something. This is the kitchen. And I discovered they cook in an old trunk. I have one at home from the 1700s. It's made out of steel, not steel, but how you call it, tin, maybe tin, yeah. But they cook in it and they make wonderful meals. And I'm sitting there thinking, what am I doing here? Just rewinding. Well, anyhow, you saw that. Here is Grub. It was Grub's birthday. We picked him up on the way to the base camp. And They're standing next to his father. He's a little taller because his mother is tall, you know. And here is, we had dinner, and I have to tell you a story about that. The first night we were sitting there, I got this fly coming on my nose, and it had big legs and didn't want to leave. He thought maybe it's a European nose, it's nice. And I got so scared, so I was doing this, trying to get rid of it, but he had really strong legs. And it was one of these. And they're huge. And if you have them, you know you don't want to sleep anymore. Anyhow. But coming back actually to that dinner. We had dinner. Grupp, as a fisherman, Grupp brought a fish with him in the airplane, and it was smelly. And then he had to do a 2-day drive to his father's camp. And he said, "Tonight we have fish." And we looked at it, and you could see, you know, the worms coming out. And I said, "No, I'm not really in the mood for fish today." And then everybody said, there was one cameraman left, no fish for us. But we had that fish for 3 days. And we only ate, I don't know what, but maybe, lettuce or whatever. And they said, "Okay, let's get a goat." So they radioed and asked for a goat. Where can we find a goat? So radio came back, we cannot find a goat. So then they radioed for a cow. Yeah, the cow was coming in a truck, and it took days. Finally, the cow arrives, and I don't know how they did it. They killed the cow, but they were not really smart. They put the whole cow with all the fur and the legs in the deep freezer. We had a big deep freezer, and they put it in there, but it was on top of our food and our ice creams and stuff we bought for him, and we could get it out anymore. I mean, we left to a smaller camp, but they had to figure out how they do that. They were all excited. The cow is coming, and there was the truck. And then they put it in the deep freezer. Okay, this is all. I only want to show you this because if you drive back, when you go somewhere, and we didn't know where we want to go, we just drove around. You can only find your way back by following your tracks of your own wheels. And as long as it's not raining, it was okay. But sometimes you have to go through high grass like this, and you cannot see the holes in the grass. I was tracing lions, and after a while we stopped because we thought if something happens to us, then you got stuck. What are you going to do? Yeah, we were on a trip, and we ended up near a lake, and I wanted to cross it, but I was not sure if the sand will hold the Jeep, you know. It was sort of mushy, and I stepped out of the Jeep, and that was not really good because I was out of the Jeep standing on the right side where the steering wheel is. So I closed the door, walked to the engine compartment next to the fender, and there's a lion sitting, maybe the distance from the front of the Jeep to the bookcase, with I think 3 cups. It said 3 cups, and the lion rose and showed her teeth and started growling. And I thought, okay, now this is so bad. I have to move back. And I didn't know actually what to do, you know. I walked back very slowly, went in the Jeep, closed the door, and I said, you know, we're not going any further. This is crazy. And then you realize that you do stupid things when you come out of a city as a city boy and walk around in all that danger, you know. And we were encountered one night by hyenas, I will tell you that. But now, if they asked me to come back, I would say, no, thank you. It's lovely, but I can't come, no. Here's the lion. The lion on the right is the woman or the female who got irritated. So coming back, you could see your own tracks and you find your way back to the camp. And in that big camp, they had a fire just for conversations, but the fire dies at night. And the next day, Hugo said, you know, let's go to another place where I have 3 tents, and it's in the plains. It's far away, and there are some hills. But there are lots and lots of hyenas and lions there, so we have to be careful. And he had a cook in his tent, and he stayed with Grupp in the other tent, and my friend and I stayed in one tent. And we parked the car, and we had some chairs, and that was it. No guns, nothing. So Hugo was there particularly for months to film the wild dogs. And the wild dogs are interesting. They look like Mickey Mouse dogs because they have these round ears. And he was following the life of these animals, you know, what they do when there are babies, puppies coming out of the ground. And I'm catching up on what I'm saying here. Actually, I don't need that. Anyhow, it takes him months to do this and then record the noises. But you cannot go there and talk. You have to be totally quiet, otherwise you scare these animals. And they got used to his Jeep. And so he's sitting in the Jeep, and there's the old days where you have to exchange movies in a black bag and then send them off to England or New York, and then they do the editing. But he had an interesting Jeep, specially built. He had 3 different stations where he could take movies up through the roof or on different positions near the steering wheel or in the back. It was sort of his office. And you see the weather changing. Here's a line not very far away. But this is Lamuta, and the rain comes in, you know, and then really starts to be really nasty. Here are the dogs, and they are living in holes to protect themselves from other animals, of course. And I give you a close-up picture of a wild dog. This is a typical wild dog with their puppies sitting there. And some of these puppies, they had their own issues. You can read in the book because one of the mothers was abandoned and was not allowed. So another dog took over and wanted to be the mother, and it's all sort of very confusing and interesting. But you can read that in the book. Here's Hugo making recordings for his giraffe movies, and sitting on a hill, and we just were there for a short time, and then we said, you know, we're going to do our own trip. And I saw in the far distance a huge tree. I mean, all the plains were flat. You didn't see anything except some mountains in the far distance. And we want to follow the Jeep, but it was really difficult because you go through steep valleys, and it's like fingers. You go up and down, and then you see the tree, and then you don't see it. And that was a really exciting day, actually. Lots of lions around us. They were not hungry, I suppose. Here's the Jeep with the open configuration. Here's the big tree. Hugo said, if you see a big tree, don't be afraid of the lions, but be afraid of the killer bees. So I want to get out of the Jeep and see if there are any killer bees, but there were 2 nasty lions laying under there, and they came out. And we followed them for a while. This is one of them, but it became really rocky, rocks everywhere, so I could not follow them anymore. But they had scratches everywhere. They looked really nasty. I have to hurry up now. Okay. So you step out of the Jeep, and there's a hill, and you think, okay, I'm going to see what's on the other side of the hill. And you just walk there like you're in your yard, and you don't realize that you can never outrun any animal there. I must be stupid, huh? So anyhow, I come to the top of the hill, and there I see wildebeest. And I was happy to see no hyenas or lions, so I'm dancing with wildebeest here. There's Grub working out, and he didn't have exercise machines. He had just used rock, you know, lifting rock all day. It looked like Tarzan, actually, to me. At night, this is the tent where we got attacked by 2 hyenas, and they were fighting over food, maybe because the cook suited enough buried food underground here, next to our tent. Yeah. And so we were up. I don't know for how many hours, but it was really scary because they fell into the tent, in the fabric, and I realized that there was only a thin layer of fabric between us and death. And we could not say anything. We hardly could breathe, and I only had a flashlight, and that was it. So the next morning they left, and nothing happened, but they were fighting all the time and banging against the tent. And I said to Hugo, you know, this is crazy. He said, well, park some chairs so you can run to your Jeep. I said, that will never work. I mean, anyhow, thousands of wildebeest. I go on now because we're almost at the end. Here is an interesting Maasai. When we came back from a trip, here's a Maasai telling us that his brother was killed not very far from the tent by a lion. And he had a spear, and he said the spear is still in the lion. And Hugo said, well, that is a major issue, because if that lion is wild, he will come. So I said, I offered the guy a ride to his settlement, And the cook translated everything, and he said, yeah, he lives, you see the mountains, the blue silhouettes of the mountains on the horizon, that's where he lives somewhere. So we took him, and we could see his settlement, and there was all cow dung everywhere. And we were impressed and took some photos, and he's there with some of his relatives welcoming us. And we drove back. Oh, here's one more photo of his wife with the babies. You see? But we drove back. Here's the guy next to his settlement. It's a dark little thing. They took us inside, and he gave me milk with blood. But it was so dark that I threw it out, maybe on his bed. But I could not drink it. I'm sorry. I mean, I like to be polite, but he didn't see that. It's still there. We came back to the tent, and I said, I'm going into these mountains and try to find the body and what happened there. And a whole crew came over. They were radioed in. They came by plane to do an investigation. And we found the rope. There it is. With all his beads laying there, everything except the body. So the body was already eaten that night by hyenas. But we discovered in the rope that in the back was a tiny hole. And in the front was a big hole with blood. So that means that the guy was killed by not a lion, otherwise this clothes would be torn out. Was killed by his brother. That was the guy I took to his settlement. He killed his brother. And I was surprised when I looked back that when we arrived there, nobody asked, where's the other brother? Nobody. So you come back, you're two guys with a spear, you walk through all this dangerous countryside. You come back only by yourself and nobody asks you a question. So the next day we had to leave, go back to the Netherlands. And the investigator said, can you show us where he lives? I said, I don't know where he lives. You go to the mountains and there's a tree, you go right, and then some rocks there, you go left. And you can hardly see it because it's a settlement that looks like, yeah, it's all protected by bushes against wild animals, but you cannot really see it, you know, unless you know where it is. I said, I have no idea. You have photos? I said, I don't know. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to stay there and be a witness for I don't know how long. I need to go back to work. So I promised them to look for photos. So I sent them the photo. And who knows what happened. Now, this is what's really interesting. There's Grub. And Grub actually became an interesting guy. His mother now is so fond of him because he has changed. He stopped fishing and selling fish. He is influenced by his mother to preserve rhinoceros. So, rhinoceroses. This is a Dutch newspaper because he was knighted by the Prince Bernhard was the husband of the Queen of the Netherlands, but he also got the highest decoration from the World Wildlife Fund. Wildlife Fund. And one of the founders was the royal family in England and the Netherlands. So Prince Bernhard, the Dutch prince, husband of the Queen, was the founder also of that organization. And they did a great thing. But he is such a humble man standing on the podium, you know, and he thought all that nonsense. But it was really nice. And that article is important because it showed that they had the first premiere in the Netherlands at the Dutch version of The People of the Forest. Well, thank you for coming. And this is the painting with no tail. We promised if there are some questions, but I understand you don't have any more questions. You just want to buy the book. But we have hors d'oeuvres there and drinks and wine, and we are happy to give you an opportunity to meet each other, and all the best, and thank you so much.
All right, folks, so if there are no more questions, we do have the book for sale at the counter over there, and Frans will be signing at the table to the left of the screen. Thanks very much.